Hello, I'm here with an old friend, Todd Stoutenbro, also known as Dhruva. He was my yoga teacher when I started college, and he was a key figure in my life. He changed my life for the better in many ways. He introduced me to eating correctly, to the problems with sugar and meat and so on and so forth. He taught me yoga, postures and breathing exercises and meditation and things like that. And it's been a force in my life which has helped me in many ways all throughout my life. So I'm here. I have the privilege of taking a few minutes of his time to ask him a few questions from the good old days. Hi Todd, thank you for your time. You were teaching at Santa Ana College as a yoga instructor.
Well, no, I was teaching architecture at the school, and I was kind of thought maybe teaching yoga would be more fun, so I just applied for the job, and they let me do it.
I think at that time your teacher told you to go out and teach or something like that.
Well, I don't think he was encouraging me to go out and teach that much, you know, because teaching's a big responsibility. It's much more difficult to do yoga than it is to teach it, actually.
You mean to teach it than to do it?
No, to do it than to teach it.
Okay.
Teaching is easy.
I see.
There's lots of yoga teachers.
It's true.
And lots of wrong information being disseminated everywhere, and a lot of wrong information I disseminated as well.
Well, I was watching you very closely. As far as I remember, I can't think of a lot of wrong information. But you're a very humble man. So.
I don't know about that. Like Patanjali says, the mind only does 5 things: right knowledge, wrong knowledge, fancy, sleep, and memory. Is the only 5 things that your mind does, according to Patanjali. And a lot of people get caught up in right knowledge, wrong knowledge, and after a while it doesn't make any difference. It's just mental exercise.
Mm-hmm. What about perception? When you look at a flower or a sunset, you just look at it and its beauty. Is that considered something your mind is doing, or is it just sensory perception? You would say the mind is silent at that point, so it's not doing any of those 5 things, would you say?
Well, that'd be the goal of being able to perceive the flower, is not to be having that perception interrupted by the mind.
Right.
And the mind's always wanting to interrupt everything, because that's the nature of the mind. So it's very difficult to look at a flower without your preconceived notion of how beautiful it is. Because maybe it's not even beautiful, maybe it's ugly. But your mind makes up all of this mystique about it, and that's how you view it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you view other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you view even yoga itself.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has preconceived ideas, you see, and it's very difficult to drop that and see things for its true nature,
Mm-hmm.
which is really what yoga is all about. But like anything, they try to put yoga in a box just like everything else. It's a call from Sherwood Forest, you see. From my iPad. Sherwood.
You can look at the sunset and it's like, oh, when I looked at it yesterday it was more beautiful, for example. That's the past destroying the present, right? Because then you're not really looking if you're trying to get the same sensation that you got last time you looked at it, for example. So you were the yoga teacher with a Ferrari. I was telling Ernie yesterday that just before the first yoga class, I heard this guitar. We turned in at college, and there he was. That's how I met Ernie. And then we both came to your class that day. So for me, it was just an amazing thing. I mean, but to be honest with you, I was like, does this guy know what he's talking about? Because you sounded like we were talking about all these big things, you know, the universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. I mean, just to plant a seed, you know, to...
Well, I had the Ferrari because I had to get that out of my system, so now I drive a Prius.
Okay.
So I had to get that. I was still in my youth, you know, I had to get that out of my system.
Right.
It took a long time, and to get all those sports cars out of my
Right.
systems, and so I can learn how to drive nicely.
Okay. Yeah, you had Jaguars and you had a bunch of stuff.
All kinds of fast cars until I finally
Right.
gave it up. Yeah.
The way I got the fast cars out of my system was through toys when I was a kid.
Oh,
Seriously.
well, smarter than me.
Because
Cheaper too.
these toys really give you a sensation, you know. And I still, when I look at a little mini Ferrari, it's like, it gives me that great feeling, you know. It doesn't have the
Well, my grandson races NASCAR.
Oh, really?
Right, he's 18 years, well, he's 17 now. He races high performance NASCAR
Wow.
on tracks.
So I remember going to Big Bear with you in your Ferrari, going up these mountain roads which said maximum 25 on the turns. You were doing like 80 on these turns. It's just such a thrill, you know?
Yeah, well, I got it out of my system.
Yeah.
Still alive.
Emptying of consciousness of its content.
It's one way to progress, I guess. It's just to work it out.
Anyway, and you play the guitar. In fact, one of the things, great things I'm always grateful to you was because the
So you play still?
Yeah.
See, I can't play anymore. My hands have gone all to shit.
Oh, shit.
I got arthritis in my fingers, and they're all bad now.
But I heard to play is good for that, actually. But have you
Yeah, well,
tried?
no, it just hurts too much.
You should try.
But
So-
every time I picked it up, I'd cry because I remember I used to play, so I don't do it anymore. It makes me too sad.
Sorry to hear that. Trust me, I can.
So I have them all sitting over there,
I see.
but I just don't play them. I like to smell them.
Yes.
The smell of the guitar is good.
Your Ramirez you still have.
Mm-hmm.
You played it
And my
great.
Chamaco flamenco guitar and all
Mhm.
those over there. Haven't played them in a long time.
Mhm.
Hurts too much.
Mhm. So Todd turned me on into all these great repertoire and the classical guitar. So I didn't know what classical
Yeah, I
guitar
mean,
was.
I've heard your music. It's wonderful.
Thanks. So he used to come. He used to teach in Elmina High School. So he came to my little house on the way there, and he had like a 2-hour break.
Mm.
So we used to eat something together, meditate. He would play the guitar.
See if I could play the Bach Chaconne all the way through without
Yeah.
screwing it up. Yeah,
That
remember that? Yeah.
Great piece. So you had some teachers from India also. Is that how you started with yoga?
Well, Shirachi Chakravarti, my teacher from India, and then also had Kriyananda, who was a teacher, who was a direct disciple from Yogananda,
Right.
who I studied with for a while.
Wow. I stayed at the Kriyananda retreat a few months ago, actually.
Yeah, I don't know how he's
Grass
doing. I
Valley.
haven't seen him in years and years.
He's kind of ill. He's old, and but the place is expanded. They own something like 800 acres of beautiful land. They have their own
Yeah.
goat farm and so on and so forth. They use a lot of free labor. They call it karma yogis.
Yeah.
Great economic idea, but wonderful place. I mean, and the thing is that the ideologies are a little bit not so clear. But if you talk to the people there, they don't. Some of them, they told me they don't even care about the ideology. They just love the area and living there, and cooperation and all that. And we went to see Muktananda. You remember?
Mm-hmm.
With a group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
We had this little clique.
Yeah, Muktananda. You met Shirachi too. I took you
Yeah, we
meet
went to
him.
his house in the backyard of it. You remember? Yeah, he was
They
quite a guy.
they both passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both him and his.
In Muktananda.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And but your first introduction was with Ramakrishna Ananda. Is that how you started with yoga?
No, I started with Kriyananda.
Okay. What do you remember where that was? Was it in
At his retreat up in the.
Grass Valley?
Mm.
Oh, you went up there. Okay. How did you find Big Bear? We used to go to these amazing retreats in Big Bear. Is there any interesting story behind that?
Well, we used to skip school when I was in high school. We'd go up there, and when it snowed, and we'd take dishes and slide down on the snow. We'd
Okay.
ditch school.
Okay.
That's how I knew about Big Bear.
Okay.
When you lived in Riverside, that's what you did. You know,
Uh-huh.
you ditch school and go up there. And
Right.
you never ditched school, did you?
Oh yeah, in high school. In New
In high
York.
school, you used to ditch school.
Yeah, I mean that's the American way, right?
Yeah.
In Iran we did it too, actually. In easy classes, go to the movies.
Learned much more ditching school than going to
Mhm.
school sometimes.
Come on, that's not good influence, Dhruva. You're a yoga master.
About that, but you know about ditching school.
I'm joking.
Kind of grown up.
So we had a yoga class in Santa Ana College that we continued to enroll in semester after semester. And you would normally do some postures and then you would give a talk about various topics. Like about eating, about gunas, about various things, you know. So you're an architect, and I remember you built many world-class buildings and structures, right? Highly successful.
Well, I've been doing it for a long time.
A Renaissance man, right?
I don't know about that. I just, it was my means of survival. Being able to design things, come up with ideas. It's how I make my living.
The secret, don't say it on the camera. Not many people know it. But I like it, actually.
Well, that's a special name.
Yeah. How did you come up with these? Was it some sort of you would go into a meditative mood and consult the books? And is there anything you can say?
Well, I had Judith Tyberg's book, which is right up there, Sanskrit. I studied with her for a while, and she passed away too, and that was her book, and she had this school, and they got all kinds of Sanskrit names and literatures, and see, Sanskrit is it's a language. It's akin to English because it's an Indo-European language. A lot of people don't know that. So a lot of the words are very similar, and also the words are onomatopoetic, because Sanskrit is the ultimate language of something. It is what it sounds like, and that's the strength of the language. Because if you could say the word right, you can almost reveals itself, because the sound is the word. So that's why it's such a kind of a holy language. It's not used anymore, of course, kind of like Latin.
We had a group of really close friends, and it was really a great thing. It was a community. We had so much love for each other.
We were all growing up together.
Yeah, that's true. And you were, from what I remember, you were about 35. Some of us, I was like, when I started with you, I was 17 and a half, or 18. Gomati was like maybe 19.
Yeah, right. Kids.
So we were all like in our early
best time.
We took a lot of trips together. We had a lot of classes together, singing. But we didn't have a dogmatic, we didn't have this dark side which some sects or cults have. We didn't have any extreme beliefs or any dogmatic stuff. So it wasn't a cult. It was a group. Nevertheless, at some point, I remember you announced that you wanted to stop teaching. Is that right? I think this was after you met your wife. Because usually talking about images, and you're not the only one, I've seen this happen with other great teachers where people portray an image of the teacher, and then when the teacher lives not according to that, they get all upset. But most of the time it's the image that people make, and so it's their problem. Anyway, so you met this wonderful lady, also a yogi, right? She was a yogi.
Well, I've known her for a long time.
Yeah.
Tara?
Yeah. You knew her already for a long time.
Of her,
But you guys hit it off for some reason. I don't need to know the details. And you decided to get married. I never forget that wedding.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of people there at that wedding. It was good.
A wedding from the heaven.
Yeah, they made 450 deviled eggs.
Oh yeah.
So I got the bill for it, 450 deviled eggs, big bill.
How many people were there?
450.
Okay. It was huge at the Sherman Gardens, right?
Right. Maybe they ate 2 deviled eggs, I don't know.
Okay. And we were the band. Me and Takubadini and Mahas and Ram Prashad.
Yeah.
I have the tape of that, by the way, the music. It's great. For me, it was amazing. I remember I was playing guitar, and the energy of the place was so powerful that I had this out-of-body experience. I was like, okay, there's this guy, no words, okay? Was this guy's playing the guitar, and I was like watching the whole thing, you know? It was amazing. And I also playing with Taco Vadini, who was an amazing musician. I was just hearing her sing would send me off, you know.
So you're experiencing your natural state.
But some people in the class were disappointed that you got married. I think part of the reason was because all the girls were in love with you. Let's face the truth. Which is not unusual, right? Guy with the Ferrari who's the leader. I mean,
yeah, well, I wasn't.
You were a gentleman and so on.
Well, I was a monk at the time, you know.
Yeah, but people change, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't change, you die.
Exactly.
So, some people cling to the same thing over and over and over and over, and die with it. I don't. I mean, whatever you think one moment is not the next moment to think the same thing. So change is what is the thing that's common in the whole universe.
Sorry, the only constant in the universe is change. That's it.
Yeah. I think even even the scientists are coming to that one.
Yeah. And as you said, if you don't change, you die. A tree which is not growing is dead tree. If the water doesn't flow, it stagnates.
And if the message doesn't change, it's a dead message too. So the things we were studying in the message of then was then, it's not now. So what we were doing then was appropriate for them, but not now. And so, you know, in the course of life, you know, Tara and I have had multiple lifetimes, it seems, you know, in the ways that we think about stuff. And we have changed over a period of time. You know, change keeps you young.
But also, I mean, this whole subject of being a monk is an interesting one. I was in Thailand, and we met this monk who came to a group retreat we had somewhere. Without a group, it was just like free format place you could go and have your own retreat. This monk came with the orange robe and stuff. So at night I was playing music. So the first night he was like, oh, I'm not supposed to dance, I'm not supposed to enjoy this, you know. But by the end of the week he was dancing with the orange robe, because he kind of found some psychological freedom that it doesn't have to contradict, you know.
Well, that's interesting, yeah.
And renunciation, that's a deep subject, right? Because I think you can live in, I mean, look at this house, it's amazing. But you can live in the world but not be of the world, right? Or you can go to the mountains and still be burning with desire. So
yeah, that's something you have to experience in life, you know. As you go through life, you're always being confronted with choices. You know, so you have to make a choice about, you want to be a monk? You not want to be a monk? You want to have a wife? You don't want to have a wife?
But I think you can be a wife, you can have a wife or a partner and still be a monk. Because, I don't know, it's a question of definitions, right? Because if you see, the thing is, there are priests who cut their private parts in order to give up their desire. But they still have desire. So it's like more in the mind than, you know.
That's pretty radical.
I saw a documentary about that.
I know, it seems like.
Yeah, it is.
Well, you know, on a spiritual quest, people do a lot of crazy things, and doesn't make it right, the things that they do. And just the notion that you're on a spiritual quest is kind of that's the fraudulent gift, because the quest itself is the thing that you're on a quest for what? To see something that's self-evident?
Exactly.
So, I mean, the whole notion of a path or a quest or going somewhere or doing something to realize what's always right in front of you is kind of the failure of the mind to surrender to what is really existing.
I totally agree.
Well, I mean, you can agree, but the experience of that is another
but
matter.
this is my life. It's
Yeah.
not an intellectual agreement.
Yeah.
Because to become, every time you get into this mode of becoming, whether it's becoming a better guitarist or becoming a spiritually growing or something like that, it's always a movement away from now. You know.
Right, and it goes to the place where I can't talk about it because the words get to that realization. So, but when people write in spiritual paths, the path, the renunciation, different things to do in yoga. I mean, these are all nice building blocks, but the real essence of the building blocks is to finally get that all that's bullshit.
I totally agree.
But they're good. It's like learning how to play the guitar. You have to learn your scales, right?
I don't know. Yes, I mean, yes, of course, but I don't know if it's necessary to go through that idea, you know, because people go through it for years, decades. They go.
Well, one of the best guitarists I've met, this woman.
Ida Presley.
Isba. No, what's her name?
Sharon Isbin.
Sharon Isbin, yeah. Had dinner with her one night, and she's basically self-taught.
Really?
And never went through any of the exercises and the ways of fingering or any of that stuff that I all learned from. And she's amazing. And she came with the realization on the guitar that her obstacle was friction.
Wow.
Internal friction of how to play. And she just was able to overcome any kind of internal frustration and friction within herself that makes her play like liquid.
Interesting. Yeah,
And that comes out of her realization that nobody else could teach her. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
And her hands are just a little tiny little hands.
Yeah, I've seen her. She's a very fluid player and stuff, but I don't particularly like her interpretations because they sound too academic, like too on purpose. Now this phrase has to be a decrescendo, you know what I mean? But anyway.
I'm not talking about her taste.
Right.
I don't have a problem with her taste in music,
amazing.
but yeah, amazing. Yeah. See, taste is another matter. Taste is more the essence of how you are.
But are you also saying that you ultimately teach yourself? Because even if you study, like I studied with many teachers, guitar teachers, but the way I look at it, I think Segovia said the same thing, that you ultimately teach yourself, right?
Well, you have to figure out how to work your own machine yourself. And you have to overcome all those little stumbling blocks of how to get liquid with it, just like yoga or life or anything else. It's all the same thing.
Right. Although sometimes it's fair to make a distinction between practical and technical things and psychological things, because the whole subject of becoming, when you're talking about like I'm going to do my scale and I become better at doing scales, I think this is fair and factual. But to say that I'm going to spiritually grow or I'm going to become, let's say if I'm angry now, I'm going to become non-angry, for example. This becomes more problematic because then it gets involved in psychological time. You know, we think that time can change things psychologically, but in fact I had a discussion with some friends recently, an email chain that came out about liberation. And they were talking about, Buddhist meditation, that you don't need to sit down and meditate because you're meditating all the time. And which kind of makes sense, although I think still to sit quietly is beneficial. But the point that I was trying to make to them is that they were saying once you're liberated, then you're liberated forever. But what I was trying to say is that maybe that's our limitation, because it's a conditioned mind's limitation to think about finality, that this final, once and it's finished, you're liberated. Or maybe it's moment to moment, because we think of in terms of time, and anyway, never mind, that's off topic.
Well, the mind can't comprehend being liberated unless it's liberated. It has no other ability to comprehend what you're talking about. And what liberated from what? I mean, the whole notion of liberation is kind of a fictitious notion of the mind as well. It's like,
yes. Yes.
Liberated from what?
Yes. Right.
I had dinner with a psychologist who lived up the street, and basically I mean, his vision of the human condition was it's all mental. If you ask who he was or how he would explain himself, it's all mental ideas. And most people live their life in that box. Okay, if you define liberation from having the mind be liberated from this notion of itself,
right.
then I suppose you could call that liberation. I mean, liberating from the mind's idea of itself, right? Because some people would call that ego. Ego is the mind's idea of itself, which has no position to see itself because it is just a computer. Your mind is just, I like, I don't like, plus minus, black, white. You know, it is, it isn't, and all that. So the experience of life becomes shallow when your total being is invested so much on that that level of existence of the mind. Okay, if the mind could be quiet, let go, and you're having pure experience that it's experience that you've never had before, you have no way of comprehending, and you start living in a life of wonder, right? And what does a religious person want to do? The first thing is to kill your life of wonder. They want to explain to you how it all is, give you an answer for everything. Why the hell you need an answer for everything?
Right, but of course then also becomes a question of definition of what truly religious means versus so-called religious. But let's not go there.
Well, religious, I mean, the definition is relink.
Yeah, right.
To relink with what? Relink with somebody else's notion of how it is? Yeah. So that we were getting to some important point here.
The thing you mentioned about the ego and I like to use...
What's the difference between spiritual fanaticism and religious fanaticism?
Same thing.
That's right. It's the same thing.
I don't even like the word spiritual, to be honest with you, because it's so misused.
Well, fanaticism.
Fanaticism is our big enemy.
Well, I don't know if it's an enemy, but it is certainly a trap.
It's the biggest... You know what Bertrand Russell said about fanatics is that the problem with the world is all the fanatics are so sure of themselves. Yeah. And all the wise people are skeptical a little bit, or,
Yeah, they've given up their wonder, and they have an explanation for everything. You had past lives. You used to be this way. You used to be that way, and on and on and on and on. Right. Enough of that.
One of the interesting things that, just very much along with this, but putting maybe a bit in different words, is that one of the main processes in the mind is to make images. So what it does is that it makes images of itself, then it also makes images of other people, and practically there is a place for image making. If you didn't have a mental image of where your house was, you couldn't get there. So and also through making images, the mind works efficiently. If it had to rebuild the whole process again and again, it would take a lot of work. So there is a right place for images, but the not the problematic place for which is a misuse of the thinking process is to make images of yourself, and then you make images of other people instead of just looking at them the way they are now. What are they saying now? Instead of thinking, and then making images of their image of you, or their image of themselves. I see this all the time in the world. But can that whole movement come to a stop? Can the mind realize this is not where I need to be, and then it just quiets down?
Well, mind only does 5 things. Right knowledge, wrong knowledge, fancy, sleep, and memory. So you stop that, and then you have an experience that you've never had before.
And the you isn't even there, because the whole idea of you psychologically is a product of that image making and thinking process. Because if you're really quiet, if you're walking down the street, you hear the birds, you can smell the trees, there is no you, there is no need for a you. You know what I mean? The you starts as soon as you start thinking, oh, me and my problems,
You start taking pictures of all that and save it in your files.
Right. And how are you doing with computers, by the way?
Yeah,
You had the
spend most of my day on a computer.
you had the funniest explanation last time we met. You said, "This system is amazing. To shut it down, you have to press start." That's funny. That is true.
Well, I don't know what they had in mind when Bill Gates came up with that nonsense.
Oh, let's not go there. Sore subject.
Yeah.
Do you study with...
But computers are interesting in the fact that your mind is just a computer. You know, it's garbage in, garbage out, and you're all, from your moment you're born, you see you have an operating system that you've been put into, and everything, and anybody that's doing coming out of an operating system, they can only do the things that system allows them to do. So if your operating system is being a Catholic, and you grew up as a Catholic, and that's your basis of working stuff out, well, there's certain things that are incompatible with that operating system, so you can't even experience, you can't even download them to your computer.
They could also cause you to crash.
Well, yeah, it crashes.
Suddenly some,
And you have to reboot.
Yeah,
That's just your mind is the same thing.
So we're talking about conditioning, right?
Well, yeah, it's the operating system.
Right.
So I'm always questioning my operating system.
My set of
And get a new
beliefs.
one. So, some people are still working on Windows,
Not DOS.
on DOS and Windows
3.1.
3.1 or whatever like this, and you send them a program, something from Windows 7, they can't even deal with it.
I still work on XP Professional because I hate Windows 7. But
Well, same analogy with a person. You see, if you're sitting there talking to a person who's their operating system is Windows 3.0, and you're sending them information from 07, they can't even deal with it. They don't have an ability
right.
to disseminate what you're trying to tell them.
Right. But there is something in every operating system called insight, not the computers. That's what's missing in computers. The human conditioning or the operating system, which you call, that person who is on 3.1 can see what they are. And if they see what they are, they have an insight and really look at what is, then there's a natural law which kicks in, which can then transform, transmute, change, whatever. If I'm a fanatic and I really see what I am, without judging it, without trying to change it, then there's a chance that this fanaticism can come to an end.
Well, the mind has no ability to really understand or know what's right knowledge and what's wrong knowledge. And from the soul's perspective, it doesn't really care if you have right knowledge or wrong knowledge. That's if you go along with the notion that there is such a thing as a soul.
Well, that's
which
a
is another
subject by itself.
Yeah, it's another subject.
But what I was talking about is not necessarily knowledge, because, like, for example, every smoker knows that smoking is bad for them. So they have the knowledge, but they still can't change. So what I propose to them, because I'm kind of a anti-smoking educator and activist in a way, I've talked with a lot of young people especially, because in Europe it's out of hand, So what I tell them is that, try to understand what you are, or see what you are, understand dependence. And it works, because when a person really sees and understands what they are, then some change can come naturally. It's not necessarily the knowledge, but it's the insight, it's the really fresh seeing. Maybe there's a difference.
People are like a ball of twine, okay? If you want to unstring it, set all that free, you have to kind of understand what knots they're in.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So, it's very difficult to be your own ball of twine and then untie your own knots.
I'm just wondering.
Kind of have no perspective on where they are and how that works. So that's why we have this relationship with the universe, because the universe, we're always bouncing off all of this experience, and you know, sometimes you get a clip and you get free of a knot or two.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think that situation exists that you're only that knot by yourself, because like Descartes, because as somebody said, to be is to be related. I mean, that's a fact. It's not even a saying. So we're always related, whether it's with the trees or with
I think, therefore I am.
No, that's a different one. That's a funny one, actually. Because that one, if you turn it around, if you say, I think, therefore I am, then you can also conclude, which is the truth of it, is that if you don't think, you are not. Which is what I was saying about whether...
But that's just about thinking, so...
No, but the building blocks of the me is thinking. The me is a bundle of memories. Without, if the brain is really quiet, there is no me. There's a thought sitting, there is a body sitting on the chair. It has its intelligence, it has its facilities of perception, but it doesn't, there is no me. It's not necessary for me to be there. Unless it is for it. So like, for example,
well, yeah, you know, to have a body, you have to have a me. How much do you want to be trapped by your intelligence or your talents or your body or your good looks or your money or your family ties.
Right.
Everybody relates to all these things, and they start defining themselves by all that, which is somewhat disables your liberty, you know. So if somebody is seeking to be free, what does that mean to you? See, freedom, be free. Shirachi, you know, when I was with him one day, he said to me, and we're talking one day, we're playing ping pong, and I asked him, you know, how he got his state of consciousness. Shook his shoulders, says, somehow I got free. See, he got free from his religions. He got free from yoga. He got free from everything that got him to where he was.
From the operating system.
From the operating system. And so he could sit there and see the world through your eyes. Because he was free. He didn't have to see the world. That he could just be with you, and he could see how I saw.
And he could also see...
Because he was free.
And
how he got there, he couldn't tell me. He said, somehow I got free. I mean, those words haunt me, you know, to this day. I mean, I don't go a day without thinking when he told me that.
But it's not so strange.
Somehow I got sleep.
You open the window, and somehow the breeze might come. But if you
so it's what it means to you.
But if you don't open the window, then it can't even come.
I suppose it's coming through the window, coming through the floor, it comes from, I don't know, down the chimney. Somehow he got free, and he couldn't even explain to me how.
Yeah.
Even to himself, he couldn't explain to himself.
The window and the breeze example was just to say that it's a mysterious thing.
Yeah, I suppose.
Or something that you cannot control. You cannot make the breeze come.
I mean, every time I watch the History Channel, I see the universe as even being bigger than I could have possibly imagined, even when I was a kid thinking it was pretty big. And now I'm contemplating universes on top of universes, you know, galaxies on top of galaxies. So how do you can't comprehend that, you see, with your mind. Can you experience it? Well, this is the experience.
Yeah.
We are having that experience. And so these kinds of things the mind can't comprehend. Like the mind can't comprehend eternity. Because the mind doesn't live in eternity. It lives in a, you know, I was born, I'm going to die kind of state, you know.
To come back to your teacher or ex, let's say a person, let's say he's had insights into this operating system, into his conditioning, and he's dropped it. traditions and so on. I mean, I don't say traditions are bad, but I think traditions are for you, not you for traditions. Certain aspect of tradition might be okay, but at least they need to be questioned. I think it's not good to just blindly accept them and live by them. So let's say you've dropped many of these walls, then you can see things much more clearly, right? Because if you don't, if you're a fanatic Catholic, for example, like the example you used, then when you see things, you try to always translate it into your own belief system, you know. So that dithers your
Well, I'm
perception.
sure there's Catholics that have gotten free, and they still are Catholics.
Yeah, I said fanatic Catholics. Just
Even
like
fanatic Catholics got free,
yeah.
and they're still Catholics. But if you ask them about their faith, they kind of joke. You know, it's not the thing that runs them.
Right.
They give reverence. They revere it,
Yeah.
and they revere how they got to wherever they go. And they, you know, it's like Sheriff would, he's, you know, dress up in Indian outfits and wear his little funny little hat. And
Who's that?
Sheriff G, you know, and wear his little funny little hat and do all the stuff he always did.
Right.
Because he's comfortable doing it, but somehow he doesn't need to do that to survive. He's free.
Right.
So that
but even us calling
was something that I experienced from him.
yeah. But it's like the universe, like you said. I think to call somebody free, that by itself is a potentially problematic subject, because as soon as people do that, then they try to compare themselves and they say, oh, he's free, therefore he can not be unfree. Is it permanent? Is it final? Da, 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 da. But I know that's not how you look at it.
It's like you're, you know, this whole subject of being free, so he brings up in everybody all kinds of imagery, you know, about what freedom is. It's like, you know, see,
Yeah.
freedom has no imagery, because to be free, you have no image of what it is.
Exactly.
So so that's why the mind can't comprehend it.
Right.
So the conundrum is always giving others these things that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
That's why that's like a Zen koan, okay, with something that makes no sense. You know, it's like one of my favorite ones is there's this wall in front of you. The wall is so high and so deep, you can't get through this wall, and it's so thick you could spend your whole lifetime digging, trying to climb it. You'd never get around this wall, but you have to get to the other side. So how do you do that? So you sit down and you meditate. And what's your realization is, whoops, the earth is round, I'm already on the other side. Okay. It's not the obvious answer to the mind, but it is real.
Yeah.
Okay. So always there's this world in front of you that your mind's always trying to put something on it, like you have to do something about it, even when it's already self-evident. I love that koan because it kind of points that out.
Yeah.
Like the sound of one hand clapping.
Right, right. Well, that one I know the answer is this.
The sound of one hand clapping is the sound of one hand clapping. Yeah, yeah.
But things like, okay, let's say love is the same thing. It's not something we can say, this is love. But we can say what love is not. We can say love is not jealousy. Love is not possessiveness. I think the same thing with freedom. I think it's difficult to define it, but we can say what is not to be free. About the universe, I have two little, my sister has two little kids, 6 and 8. So one day the 8-year-old girl, very smart, she said, Uncle Zeze, they call me Zeze, is it true that the universe is infinite, that it keeps, that it has no end? Just like that. I said, well, that's what we think. You know, astronomy, to the best of our ability, it just keeps growing. And then we started talking about stars, and they knew a little bit. I introduced them to the idea of galaxies, and she wrote, oh, galaxies, I learned something new. And the little one, 6-year-old, says, well, and he talks like a cartoon, you know, it's so cute. He says, wow, a star must be really big, like the size of this room.
Like the sun out there setting in the ocean, yeah.
He says, a star must be really big, like the size of this room.
Mm-hmm. That's whatever you can imagine. And the same. Answer me this riddle, so if change is the constant of the universe, what is love? Well, you define change, as this thing that's constant in the universe. I've heard people talk about love as the constants in the universe. What, there's two things?
But to me it makes perfect sense, because it's dynamic. It's another, the way I see it, there's the movement that we know, our senses know, the movement of which is in time, right? And then there's another movement altogether, which is the movement of love. Maybe that's the change you're talking about. It's a different dimension altogether.
Right. Okay, good. So it's like love, and you experience love as there's always change involved.
That makes sense.
Moves your heart. It changes your point of view.
That's interesting.
It changes your being. Right. That's what love is, and that's why it's so powerful. When you meet somebody, or through all of it, love is change. It changes you.
But it also can be, I think it's much more than just finding the love of your life or falling in love, so-called. It's much more than that. It could be you're standing in the middle of the street and there's the bus, and you can feel it's like it encompasses everything.
Mm-hmm.
Love is like, it's everything in a way. It's difficult to explain. Or you see it in the face of
Yeah, it's one of the mysteries of being, Little doggies have it even.
So I'm curious about the guitar. You studied with Bartolomeo
Calatayud,
right? In Mallorca.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up in Mallorca?
Well, my father wanted to be a great American novelist, and so we sold everything we owned. They owned a motel, and they sold the motel, and we moved to Spain so that he could write his books. Well, I was unsuccessful at that, but it's a great experience for us kids, because we got to go to a Spanish-speaking school, learn Spanish, and experience a different culture. And at the time I was taking piano lessons from Pearl Peterson. Mm-hmm. My piano teacher was also my dad's piano teacher. She had Parkinson's disease, and so she would always be shaking, except for when she played.
Nice.
She would I'd go over, and I'd play my little piece. She'd give me gold star if I played it right, silver star if it was kind of good, a green star. I had to come back and do it again. But she had two pianos in her house, side by side, upright pianos, one for the student, one for her. And so I had, taken piano lessons, and when we moved to Spain, there wasn't any pianos, and so they got me a guitar for $7. And found the best teacher on the island, which was Bartolomé Calatayud, and he was Mallorquin. Okay. And at that time, as an older man, he'd written a lot of stuff, and my Spanish wasn't really good at the time. But then I took lessons from him. It cost 50 cents for an hour.
Wow!
For a whole lesson.
Nice pieces.
And he would handwrite my music, in a music book during my lesson. That was when I was trying to grow fingernails. When I was having trouble, because I was a kid, I was breaking my fingernails, and they weren't real strong. So he was helping with that, and then I studied in England.
You said he was a smoker, right?
Or Bartolomé Calatayud, yeah, I smoked a pipe, I think.
Oh, okay.
He was always smoking
I don't know why I had that memory.
He was always smoking a pipe. He was doing that. Took a picture of him. He had this window in the studio. It had a key, it was open to the sky, and it was in the shape of a key, and this light would come through this keyhole right down where he would write my music. And last time I was in England, I found one of his books I have over here. I'll give it to you.
I might have this one. Let's see.
I bought that in London. Tara and I were in London, and I used to take guitar lessons near Piccadilly Square in London. And
at the Spanish Guitar Center?
Right, the Guitar Center in London.
Yeah.
And so I was remembering that when Tara and I were having lunch, and I'm going, I used to have guitar lessons around here somewhere. I looked out the window and there it was.
Yeah, it's still there.
It's still there, and then we walked in, and I remembered the place.
You
and
go upstairs.
Upstairs, met the guy, and
it was started by John
him.
Williams's father.
John Williams, and I took lessons there for about, all the time we were there for about a year.
With John Williams?
No. Well, he would come and go.
Okay.
He was young at the time.
Yeah.
But
his father started the place, I think.
Yeah. Anyways, this Manhattan, they had that book there, so I got it, because for memory's sake. Not that I would learn any of that stuff again, but I don't know. This was inside of it. What this is? Oh, this is like Christmas carols. My God.
From your center, maybe.
Tara knows every line, every verse of it, every Christmas carol ever written.
Wow.
She could also recite every show tune from Broadway. Knows every song.
Amazing.
She's like that.
So we had this organization called Yoga Universal.
Mm.
Very friendly thing we were talking about. And I remember once, I think after you got married, at some point you decided to teach, or maybe your teacher was telling you to stop teaching because you were probably taking all these students or something like this.
Yeah, we had a disagreement about stuff, about that,
And I remember one night driving home after you basically abolished Yoga Universal.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving home on Hughes Avenue from El Molino High School, and I felt so alone, not in a bad way, but suddenly I felt, oh, this social support is gone. I felt really alone. But
like you're abandoned by your parents.
No, not in that way, but just the feeling of being very alone. Not lonely or anything, but just independent. And anyway, just one chapter came to an end, but the love continued. I don't believe in psychological or spiritual growth.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you believe in?
Nothing. I mean, nothing in the sense of in these lines. I think a lot of such beliefs are not necessary, and because if you want to become free, then you're not, because you're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, it's already there. Not as the
that's the conundrum of life. It's really, you believe, when you believe something, that's what your mind does. Mind believes that that's its business, to believe in things.
Well, it gives it security, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some ways.
Yeah, but until back in those days, people were going through a period in their life where their hearts were being broken.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about our friends?
Yeah, just people around you, and that's part of waking up to life, is that all of the things that you believe in and their little boxes that you put stuff in kind of fall away, and so that's painful. Your heart gets broken. People that used to believe in you or think you were a certain way, then they don't see you in the same light, and you move out of their space, but they're still in the space. Mm-hmm. And those hearts get broken, which is kind of an experience of being awakened, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found in my life through growth, I don't call it spiritual growth, but learning. Because when you say spiritual growth, there's always a subject of trying to achieve a state, but that state itself is changing, right? Like you said. So there's no fixed point you try to get to, so the whole idea of becoming is kind of frivolous, the way I see it. But learning in life, I've learned that it's so much easier and so much better when I don't make images, and I just try to be with facts instead, as much as possible. And I see it's so many people run into a lot of psychological torture by imagining things which are not even true about other people's motives and so on and so forth, fears.
Yeah.
So you still do some stretches, some hatha yoga?
Sure.
Me too.
Every day. You see, the whole point of hatha yoga was to point out to where you have tension in your body.
Right.
Okay, so I would think the main goal to hatha yoga, the ultimate goal, is not to put tension in your body in the first place. If you didn't put tension in your body, then you wouldn't have to get it out.
You mean throughout the day, in your movements and so on?
Right.
Okay.
It's like Sharon Isbell in her guitar playing.
Mm-hmm.
What her realization is in her guitar playing is if I can get the friction out, then I can play in a really smooth way. It's not like doing exercise to try to break down the friction. What it's doing, what yoga is doing, is pointing out to you where you're obstructed, and what are you going to do about it? Push through it, break it, hurt it, or are you going to let go of it? Say, those are the choices, right? So when you get really good at hatha yoga, you don't necessarily need to do it so much because you don't have any friction to put in there in the first place.
Have you heard of Alexander technique?
The what?
Alexander technique.
I don't know what that is.
Never heard of it? Yeah, it's pretty big. Anyway, this guy was an Australian actor, and he would lose his voice on stage, and then, a long story, but he developed this thing which is now taught in voice studios and acting classes, and doctors even send patients for lower back pain to Alexander lessons. But his basic idea is that there's a right relationship between head, neck, and torso, and when because of the modern lives, tensions and stresses and so on, we lose this right relationship. So he talks about use of the self, and it's a similar idea to what you were saying, is that in the daily life, the idea is to have the least amount of friction and not to tense the neck muscles so your head is freely flowing, because the head is quite heavy. But for things like guitar playing and anything which is really fine, that efficiency is very important, right? To be very efficient.
Yeah, that's how you approach it. So that hatha yoga is not an end to itself, but it's a step along the way, I suppose. It's a good step to getting free because you figure out where you're tied up. And it helps point that out.
And sometimes if you have too much tension in the body, you can't even start looking at these more subtle facts.
Right, it's my tension and I want it myself and I'm not going to give it up. Fight the idea of, people get these ideas that, it's kind of crazy ideas like, gay marriage is bad or something like that. They want spend $20 million in California fighting it or something like that, and you go, well, what's it to you? What? And some people would make that up, and they get all their energy and all tied up in knots about it. It's just an example, but
right.
I get 20 examples a day. I'll do, Get obsess about something,
Yeah. I like what you were saying, which is a big part of yoga, is that it reverses gravity, right?
Well,
that's one of the benefits.
Gravity is what wears you down,
right,
to dust. So, turn upside down, reverses it. That's a theory. Hard to be upside down for very long.
It helps.
Yeah.
It really helps.
Nothing wrong with it.
But it's not a way of achieving liberation, because some people try to use that.
Well, you got yoga centers all over the place nowadays. They got Yoga Works and yoga this and yoga that.
You got punk yoga.
Beacon yoga and punk yoga and
everything.
Yoga that's cold, yoga that's hot, and all this.
It's amazing.
Okay,
But if the rishis knew, they would be turning in their grave.
No, I think they would. They would probably go looking for soma. They lost the recipe for soma. Darn,
But a lot of it has become very competitive. It's become like sport. I've gone to a lot of these yoga so-called new so-called yoga classes because I don't even consider it yoga. And it's like aerobics. And they teach it in gyms and stuff.
Yeah,
It's so competitive and forceful. And you know one of the great things about the yoga you taught, or things like Vini Yoga, which Jessica Charta teaches, is that there is a moment of silence between the poses. You know, it's not like go, 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 go. Like I remember you were saying that this is like a sponge, right? You do the postures and then you let the sponge go so you can absorb prana.
You know, Jesus had a lot of good things to say, but then they made a church about him when he messed it up. So, you know, it's like they're doing the same thing with yoga, doing the same thing with everything. You know, it's the, you know, Maya just takes over. You know, it just grinds everything down like gravity.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it's going to do that to yoga.